ठीक है, स्टार्ट करें। ओके, आराम से 10 सेकेंड 20 सेकेंड ले लो। Well, good morning. Now, in the previous class before the weekend, as far as I remember, we were talking about self-awareness. And we had seen the two aspects of self-awareness, mindfulness as proposed by Buddha, and the second, you can see the intuition ability of the person that comes out of that mindfulness, self-aware mindfulness. So, till this point, I think we have talked about in the previous class. You can confirm that in the class chat. Then after, we will talk about something more on that, change the paragraph, and then after write further. On the basis of self-awareness, the following emotional competences have been identified. On the basis of self-awareness, the following emotional competences have been identified. First one is emotional awareness. The following emotional competences have been identified. First one is emotional awareness. Now, write down firstly in this one. It is our ability to, emotional awareness, it is our ability to recognize, how our emotions affect our performance. It is our ability to recognize how our emotions affect our performance and how our emotions affect our performance, and to use our values as a guide to our decision making. So, this is how we can define emotional awareness in a very simple language. In each of these competences that we are going to discuss in our class, I will similarly give you a exact definition of one line, simple, exact, to the point definition of these competences, and I will expect you people to remember these definitions. You can use these definitions as a part of your answer anywhere. Whenever there is a question on these topics, there can be a question like, for example, write a short note on this, or wherever you appropriately find it, then you find it appropriate, you can use that as a part of your definition. Then after we will discuss how we understand this definition in detail. So, write down further. The people who are high in this competence number one, They know what emotion they are feeling and are able to name them appropriately. They know what emotion they are feeling and are able to name them appropriately. So, this is the first important thing that defines the emotional awareness. The idea here is that as we have seen in our earlier class last week perhaps, that every emotion we can express or describe emotion in form of a circle like that. So, there we had seen that you can say that every point of the circle, high arousal, low arousal, positive valence and the negative valence. And as we have seen that every point of this circle indicates one particular emotion. So suppose for example at this point of time, this is the emotional state that you have, this arousal and that valence. So this is your emotional state that you have right now. Then we can say that every culture, every language allows us to label that emotion. That what exactly is the meaning of that internal state. So this is what every language, this label is actually called the name. So every culture has a certain points that it can be possibly named. In English language, as I told you, that there are 512 such emotional words are there according to one research. So 512 points may be there in this circle that an English language speaking person can easily recognize and understand. So the idea is that every language allows us to, what is that emotion, what is the name of that emotion. These people are able to name that label well appropriately. In a way, what we can see that one sign of emotional awareness is that they have a very rich emotional vocabulary. They have a very rich emotional vocabulary and they use that vocabulary to describe their internal state of mind. What do they feel again? Suppose for example, if I ask you how do you feel right now, and if you say that I am feeling very good today, then that is a bad emotional intelligence. Why so? Emotional awareness. Why so? Because being good means what? Being good can be any of that. So you should be more specific. What is it the meaning of that good for you? Are you feeling happy, thrilled, excited, pleased, joyous, calm, composed? Well, whatever you can see. So there can be many of that meaning of good. Similarly, if you say simply that I am feeling bad, then that also is a bad emotional intelligence, because bad means all of that may be. So you have to be more specific about it. What exactly is the meaning of that bad for you? So one sign of emotional awareness is that they are better able to describe their emotional state, internal state, that what is going on inside them, the body and the mind, synchronized manner. So they have a very rich emotional vocabulary and they use that emotional vocabulary to describe themselves, to talk about themselves, or when they describe others also. So having a rich emotional vocabulary is a very important part of emotional intelligence. As I told you in the previous class also, when we talk about Paul Ekman, then I told you that you can consult that, you can say that Atlas of Emotions, where you can actually find, you can say, a better vocabulary of understanding various types of emotions in a way. So that is one important sign of emotional awareness, having a good vocabulary. To name is an important part of emotional awareness. It's the beginning of sort of. First one. Second important thing is, write down further, they know the causes of their emotions as well. They know the causes of their emotions as well. They know the causes of their emotions as well. So that is a second important thing that defines the emotional awareness. Because as we have seen in our introduction class, that every emotion has a cause. Every emotion has a triggering triggering event that triggers an emotion in us. So one sign of emotional awareness is to be able to understand what causes that emotion, and that is not very simple all the time. Very often what happens that we are confused about the causes of our emotion. Suppose for example, just take a small simple example. Suppose for example, this is time and there is a person working in the office. Now, in the afternoon, suppose the boss scolds him badly. Now, this person is very angry at the boss, but he cannot do anything, boss is boss. So he is angry, but he cannot express his anger. His anger keeps on brewing up inside him. Suppose in the afternoon he is coming to his home, somebody scratches his car somehow. Now he is angry at that person, but that person has already fled away. You can't do anything to that person, can't do. So anger is there. So during the day, so many things happen to us that keep on creating emotional turmoil in us. And we keep on, you can say, and that keeps on brewing up inside us, into, you can say, increasing. And suppose the same person comes home in the evening, there is a small child who does something, some mischief. And this person starts shouting like a mad person. If you ask him that why are you shouting like a mad person, well, then he will say, okay, this child is such a naughty child. Now, in this case, he has to realize that he does feel angry and shouting like at a child, but his anger is not on the child. His anger is on the boss or many other things that happen during the day to him. The moment he will realize that he is angry, but his anger is because of all those events that happened during the day, then he would be more in control of himself. So this is somehow you can say many different causes of the anger or emotions maybe more generally get fused together. So one sign of emotional intelligence is emotional awareness is to understand not only what emotion they are feeling but the causes of that. In a way you can say two important questions. What emotion you are feeling and why are you feeling that? Both of these two things are important part of self-awareness. Second point. Third one, write down further. They also realize how their emotions affect their thought, speech and actions. They also realize how their emotions affect their thought, speech and actions. So as we had seen again in our introduction class of emotions, that emotions influence our thought, through that speech and through that actions. So one sign of emotional awareness is also this, that how does our emotion affect our thought, speech and action. That also gives us a lots of control and power into our hands. So for example, you can see, if suppose you are angry at your friend and your friend appears to be a bad person for you, then you should realize that your friend appears bad to you not because he is a bad person, but because you are angry. Your anger makes you to see him as a bad person. Anger is a type of color on our glass on our eyes. We had seen that in our previous class. So your anger makes you to think him as a bad person. The moment you realize that your anger is the reason for which he appears bad, then you are more in control of yourself. So that is what we can say is another important thing. Fourth one, they also realize how their emotions affect their performance. They also realize how their emotions affect their performance. So that is another very important thing about the emotions and can say emotional awareness, because the idea here is that there has been a direct correlation that has been found between the emotions and the performance of ourselves in any task that you are talking about, any job that you are talking about. So what is that relationship? How do we express that relationship? We often express that relationship in the form of a curve. It is a very famous curve in the field of psychology. We often call that as Yerkes-Dodson curve. Yerkes and Dodson were the two psychologists who had actually discovered or created this form, you can say this curve, well, more than 100 years ago. But it has been extremely influential to help us to understand how these two things are related. So that is one important thing that, so what is that curve? In this curve, suppose this is the performance that you have. And suppose for example, this is the emotional arousal. Particularly arousal, but balance also plays a role in that. How the two are related? Well, relationship between the two is found to be something like this. Now, what is the meaning of that curve? Well, meaning of this curve is that suppose for example, your arousal is very low. At very low arousal, we simply sleep. Sleeping is what? Sleeping is a lack of arousal. So you don't perform anything at that. Suppose at this point your arousal is slightly higher. At this point you will not sleep, but you will feel sleepy. Your performance is very bad. At this point, suppose you feel bored. Your performance is a little better, but not that good. Your arousal is further higher. At this point, perhaps you will feel distracted, disinterested. Your performance is not that good. At this point, perhaps your arousal is optimum. Your performance is best at that point. But so best performance at that point. But interesting thing is that if your arousal increases more than that, then our performance further starts dropping down. So at this point, for example, you will feel anxious. Your performance is low. At this point, you feel a little tense. Your performance is slightly low. At this point, you start feeling stress. Your performance is very down. At this point, you become nervous. Performance very bad. At this point, you become panicky. Your performance may become 0. So the idea here is that at low level of arousal also we perform badly, and at high level of arousal, particularly with negative valence, we also perform badly. So in order to perform at an optimum level of performance, we need to have an optimum level of arousal. So that is what we can say. We understand that. Now what are the factors on which this optimality actually depends on? Now this optimality depends on two factors. First factor is the person. So for each person, you can see that you can see the optimal is different. So what is optimum for me, for example, may not be optimum for you. So each one of us have our own optimum level of arousal. That is why it is a sign of, it is a part of self-awareness. Optimum is different for different persons. Number one. And we say, some people perform at a comparatively low level of arousal, and some people perform better at a comparatively high level of arousal. And in every job, every work that you do, it is found to be effective. Suppose, for example, well, take the case of cricket, for example. In Indian cricket, there was one important player in the last 20 years, one of the important cricketer. Well, he is often, you can say, seen as performing very well at a comparatively low level of arousal. Who is he? I hope some of you may have already thought about his name. He was Mahendra Singh Dhoni, MS Dhoni. So Dhoni, always look at Dhoni when he is in the field, always quiet, calm, composed. So we often call him as Captain Cool. What does that mean? Always cool, always calm, always low in arousal. And compare that with another player who is often known to perform much better at a comparatively high level of arousal. So comparatively high level of arousal. Who is he? Well, all of you know him, Virat Kohli. Look at him when he is on the field. Well, always you can say very active, very high arousal, always running, jumping, screaming, shouting, etc. So he often performs much better at a comparatively higher level of arousal, and the other person, well, Dhoni perhaps, for example, performs much better at the lower level of arousal. So different people work different. We cannot emulate others. So if Dhoni starts working like Virat Kohli, then he might fail. And when Kohli starts behaving like Dhoni, he might also be a failure. We all have our own level of optimum arousal. We have to understand this, and we have to see that how does it maintain. So person is important. And second factor on which this optimality depends on is the job that we are doing, work that we are doing. So for same person, for different work, different level of arousal may be required. Suppose, for example, if you are attending a physical classroom just in front of me, then you will need a different level of arousal. Same person, you. So if you are attending this classroom physically sitting on chairs in front of me, and we are in front of each other face to face, then in order to perform better in that physical classroom, you need to have a different level of arousal. But in order to perform better watching this same lecture on a mobile or on a laptop, for example, you will need a different level of arousal. Or when we are studying at home all alone, different level of arousal. Studying in library with a number of students around, a different level of arousal will be there. Or when we are in an examination hall, a different level of arousal will be required. So at different places, or even in the same classroom, when you are studying ethics, then you need a different arousal. And when you are studying polity and economy or geography or science tech, etc., you will need a different level of arousal. So each work that we are doing, well, we require different levels of arousal in that work. So that is something that we have to take care of. So this is where we can say emotional awareness comes up. So not only we have to understand what is my optimum level of arousal, but we have to also understand in which work we are doing, how much arousal I require. So that is how we understand the self awareness or emotional awareness. So one sign of emotional awareness is that they know what is the optimum level of arousal for them, and when it is lower than that, then they know how to increase that, and when it is higher than that, then more than optimum, then they know how to decrease that. So this internal manipulation is very important part of self-awareness. When it is low than average, low than optimum, we have to increase that. And remember, increasing that is easier. Suppose, for example, just now you are watching this lecture all alone, perhaps in a laptop or in a mobile. Suppose suddenly you start feeling sleepy. What you do in that case? Well, sometimes you might even sleep also, that is not advisable. Sometimes you might sleep also, but otherwise what you do, suppose you are studying and you feel sleepy. And if you don't have to sleep, then what you do? Well, you do something in order to arouse. You have a cup of coffee, for example, that arouses you. Cup of tea, for example, that arouses you. Switch on the music, that arouses you. Talk to somebody on mobile, that will arouse you. Go out and walk around for some time, that will arouse you. I have seen some students, when they feel low, then they go out and do cycling for half an hour maybe, or running for 10 minutes maybe. That arouses. Some people go to gym and will do high energy exercise, get aroused, and then after perhaps come back and study again. Some students even smoke. That is a bad thing, but they claim that that also arouses them. So idea is that they find out, everybody has his own strategy, that if I feel low in arousal, then what should I do in order to increase my performance? That is easier to do. More difficult is that. So negative emotions are more sticky, which we will discuss in tomorrow's class maybe in more detail, that they become more sticky, they become more problematic. So, but they know how to control that also equally well. So that is the idea of the self-awareness in this sense. So this is the meaning of that point that I talked about. They know how their emotions affect their performance, how their arousal affect their performance, how to maintain that, how to achieve that, etc., etc. And then finally, last point, the most important aspect of the self-awareness. Every other thing that we have talked about in self-awareness finally boils down to this final point. What is that final point? Write down for them. They are aware of their deep-rooted, personal values and use them as a guide to their decision making. Making. So that is the next important thing that this thing self-awareness requires. Final point, last important point, very important point, the most important point. Now before we talk about this point, let us talk about a little values. What is the meaning of the term value? Value we have been talking about throughout our class so many times. Now what are the values? Now values are those criteria, normally we say, that help us to clarify our choices and allow us to take decisions about our life. So suppose, for example, at one point of time you have two choices in front of you, say A and B, and you have to make a decision what is right and what is wrong. And suppose you are confused, you are not able to make up your mind what to do and what not. Now in such a situation, our values often guide us. Suppose, for example, this choice is, I will give you some example of these values shortly, but sometimes you can say that suppose, for example, this choice is consistent with your value, and suppose this choice is inconsistent with your value, then we consider that as the right action and we consider that as the wrong action. So that is how we can say our values help us to decide. And in such cases, you can say our emotions indicate us that did we act in accordance with our value or not. How does our emotion tell us? Well, our emotions tell us by giving arousing certain type of emotion. So for example, when you do something right, we have discussed that in our introduction class also. When you do something right, then we have positive emotions like pride, enthusiasm, positive energy, confidence, optimism, etc. So we have seen that earlier also. Here we can be more specific about these things. So in such a situation, we often feel pride, enthusiasm, positive energy, like that's right side of that first quadrant of that circle. So there we had seen that this one, positive and you can say energy, high arousal and positive balance. So first quadrant of that circle, that is the emotional state that they try to create in us. We feel enthusiastic, proud, positive, confident. So you feel confident about our own decision. Optimism we'll discuss a few days later, well just this week itself. So optimism means that, well, our ability to handle the difficulties, setbacks, problems, etc. That is what we feel. And on the other hand, when you do something like B, which is in can say we're not in accordance with our value, which is against our own value, then again emotions tell us that we have done something wrong. How does our emotions tell us in that case? Well, it tells us by giving us the negative emotions like guilt, guilt, or you can say the doubt, confusion, remorse, lack of confidence, nagging second thoughts, etc., etc. Nagging second thoughts, etc., etc. So these are the important things. So in such a case, when we do something against our value, we feel ashamed or guilty of ourselves, that you can say doubt is there in our, remorse is there in our actions, lack of confidence is missing. We do something, but that confidence is missing, and second thought keeps on coming to us, that did I do the right thing or not? Did I do the right thing, or I shouldn't have done that? I shouldn't have done that. So these rethinking, regurgitation of thought keeps on coming about the quality of our decision in that case. That indicates that our decision was wrong, our decision was not in accordance with our own value system, our decision was against our own value system. So this is what we can say that we tell here. Normally it is seen that when we do something like A, for example, then we are often more satisfied with our own decision. And when we do something like B, then we often regret our own decisions. We often regret our own decisions. So the satisfaction and the regret in the decision making often comes from the coordination between our value and the choice. So this is what has been found by our research in that case. Now, next important question is that what are those values? What is the meaning of that value? Now, the meaning of that value is that these values are personal. Again, remember, we are not talking about some grand moral values like dignity or human rights or liberty, etc., or equality or whatever. We are talking about the personal value. We all have certain personal value inside us, which often guides our personal decisions in our life. Suppose, for example, can you tell me what was the most important value that Gandhi stood for? Of course, all of you know truth and non-violence. So, when Gandhi, you can say, whenever truth and non-violence was the most important value that Gandhi as a person stood for. So, whenever Gandhi took decisions about his life, he always used truth and non-violence as a way to understand that. Decide what is right number. Take one beautiful example you can find here was the case of, you can see the was the case of, you can say, almost 100 years ago, 1922, after Chauri Chaura movement, he found himself at a crossroad. So after Chauri Chaura movement, he had two choices. Either he could have ignored the Chauri Chaura event and he could continue with the movement. And second choice was that well, he could have taken a strong stand and called the movement off. Now in this case, everybody in the Congress party suggested him that we cannot call this movement off. This movement is at its peak right now. So it is impossible for us to call this movement off. It is not, you can say, it is, people will never listen to you. But Gandhi had a strong conviction that no, this event, Chauri Chaura, is against my value system, that is non-violence. So because of that, he said that no, this movement has to be called. He had no confusion, no doubt, no second thought about that. He took a strong decision that however successful the movement is, but it is against my value system. our value system. So we have to call this movement off, and he called that movement off. So many such examples you can find in the life of Gandhi when he took decisions purely on the basis of his value system, that was truth and non-violence. So that is how we can see values guide us in our decision making process. Now we cannot have truth and non-violence as the only value for us. We all have different value sets with different sets of value. So self-awareness requires that we should first of all identify what are those values which we stand for. What are those important values that we stand for in a specific manner. So for example, just think of it. I will give you a list of these values and try to understand that, try to find out that how many of these values and which value in which priority you stand for. Think of it. Some people value truth, some people value non-violence, Gandhi. Some people value relationship, some people value power, some people value money, some people value status, some people value respect, some people value position, some people value travel, some people value knowledge, some people value leisure, some people value, you can say, social service. So some people value diplomacy, so conversation with the people and all. So there are so many things that people value. Self-awareness means that make a list of these things which you think you value the most. And then on the basis of that, well, prioritize them. Which is the most important value that you stand for, which is the second one, third one, fourth one. That will guide your decision making in a much better manner, as we will see with some examples later. Suppose for example, there is a person who values money a lot. Suppose there is a person who values money a lot. There is nothing wrong in valuing money. There are some people, I have seen them, I know them, that they value money a lot. When they see lots of currency notes in front of them, they become very happy. Or when they see the number of zeros increasing in their bank account, for example, then also they feel very happy. So they value money a lot. Now suppose there is a person who values money a lot, and that person chooses civil service as his career choice. Will that be the right choice? Well, perhaps not. Because if he values money and he becomes civil servant, then chances are high that he will become the most corrupt officer in the country, perhaps. Because value of money and civil service are two different. Civil service is not about money, and civil service is more about public service. Civil service is more about, well, public interest. So if you value money and you become civil servant, then you are actually going against your, sometimes or the other in your life, maybe you may regret it. You may regret either way. If you start being corrupt in order to take the more money, then might be at the end of your career, towards the middle of your career, you might be in a CBI net in jail and your career will be destroyed. Or even if you do not go into the jail, and if you earn money, then also you will never be able to spend that money the way a businessman can spend that money. So you may have the money, but still you have to live in the same government quarter maybe. You cannot make an interior for yourself. So you cannot show off that money that you are doing. You have to hide that again from everybody. Or if you do not earn that money because of the fear of problem, you will always be sad in your mind. Yes, my friends are so wealthy, so rich, and I do not have that much of money. So you will always feel that regret. I should have done perhaps something else. Civil service was not for me. So that regret will be there again and again for you. So if money is your value, then civil service is a bad choice. If social service is your value, maybe, well, bringing about a meaningful change in the society, well, civil service is the great choice. The idea is that we have to make it, there is nothing wrong in money as such. It is all about whether your value system and your choice, do they match or not. So one sign of self-awareness is that such people are able to match their choice with their value system. That often makes it easier for them to take a decision, and makes a comfortable life for these people also, without regret and more satisfaction. This is what this theory is, this idea essentially tells us. Now, the problem sometimes happens to us is that life sometimes puts us at a crossroad. Sometimes we want this also and we want that also. Sometimes we want the power of a civil servant and money of a businessman. That is where the problem comes up. So this is what you can see, that you can see what I was talking about. So life sometimes puts us at a crossroad. We want this also and we want that also. So And life sometimes puts us that crossroad, that fork. A beautiful book I had read somewhere long ago, that life at a fork. So life becomes at a fork. You have to take a decision, go this way or that way. Suppose, for example, you love your father a lot, and your father wants you to become an engineer. But suppose you want to become a wildlife photographer. Well, I hope now that you know the story again, you remember, you notice that. I'm talking about Farhan Qureshi of Three Idiots. So he found himself at this crossroad, that on the one hand, his father wanted him to become an engineer, but he loved his father a lot. He did not want to offend his father, to hurt his father. But deep down, he had a strong desire to become a value system to guide him to become a, you can say, the wildlife photographer. Now, for 3 years in that college, he kept on fighting with himself what to do. And finally, towards the end of the film, what happens, that he was able to convince his father that, please father, let me do what I want. And his father agreed at the end of the thing that, okay, do whatever you want. That live your life, my son. And after that, you can see that this young man did not take even a second to take a decision. Think of it, people die to take admission in such a college, and here was a person, even after spending 3 years in that college, well, he, you can say, did not take a second also. There is no second thought, should I do that or not? So much of clarity was there in his mind, this is my path, I have to go this way, this is not my road. So values help us to clarify such thing, that which direction we should move in the life. So that is the role of the value system, which we are aware of when we are self-aware. Now, I often like to call this value system that I am talking about here as internal GPS system. Internal GPS. We all have a GPS in our mind which guides us in our life, that where to go in the life, how to proceed, how to move in the life. Because, life is a journey. And if you look at GPS, what is the advantage of GPS? Is one of the best inventions, you can say the useful invention of the recent time, at least for the people like me, who drive a lot on the roads. So, GPS have been the most effective, most beneficial invention of the modern time. Because when you leave your home, GPS can tell you that take this path is free. Don't take that path, this path will be congested, there is a traffic jam. Our value systems work in a similar manner. Our value system also tells us that don't go this way, you will get stuck. There is a jam, there is a congestion here. Take that way, go that way, that is free path, will reach your destination more smoothly. Life is a journey, you have to reach at a destination at the end of it. So how smooth your journey is, your value determines. So one sign of self-awareness is that they are very clear about what they stand for, what are their value system, and they use that value system as a guide to their decision making. So this is what the meaning of this last point that we talked about here. That is the meaning of the term value and the decision. A few years ago, there was a question in the UPSC exam that what is emotional intelligence and how does it help us to take ethical decision? In answer to that question, you can write this. You can define emotional intelligence first of all, and then after you can write that emotional intelligence helps us to take ethical decision in three manners. First one is this, that emotional intelligence allows us to understand our own value system so that we can take decisions on the basis of that. That is called ethical decision, that is called unethical decision. So that is first important. Second way we will talk about tomorrow, third we will talk about 2-3 days later. So that is how we can say that our value system helps us to arrive at a decision, at a conclusion. That is the importance of the value system. Now, next important thing that we will talk about here is that how to increase emotional awareness. But before that, one small point that we like to again say mention here, that in emotional awareness, like in many other emotional intelligences, some amount of gender difference has been found. Gender difference has been found. Now, can you tell me that which of the two genders, male or female, is normally high in self-awareness? I hope that you can understand that, all of you can answer that question. Females are normally high in self-awareness, in emotional awareness. That is an observed fact. So there can be some question on this topic also, that is there any gender difference in the self-awareness, in emotional intelligence or not? You have to write there that in some emotional intelligence, some amount of gender difference has actually been found. Self-awareness is one of that. Empathy is another that we will discuss a few days later. So that is how self-awareness can be understood in that sense. Now, what is the but So that you can write here. But there are two important points that you have to keep in mind when you talk about the self-awareness and the gender. What are these 2 points? First important thing that you need to mention in your answer is that this gender difference is always a statistical difference. It is not an absolute difference. What does that mean? It means something like this. Suppose, for example, you take a large number of men and a large number of women. Suppose you take all females of Delhi and all the males of Delhi, maybe 1 million females and a million male or a million female. So let's take all of that and they measure their emotional awareness and plot a curve of that on a probability curve. This is the probability and that is the emotional awareness. If you make a plot a curve of that, then you will get a curve like this. So this will be curve of female and that will be the curve of male. So the meaning of this curve is that if you look at if you randomly take up any female and you check her emotional awareness, it will turn out to be this. And if you randomly take up a male also and you evaluate, if you judge, if you measure his awareness, then that will turn out to be this. So an average woman will have higher emotional awareness than the average male, but there is always, you can say, extreme. That there are many males who have better self-awareness than most of the females also, and there are many females who are worse than most of the males also. So there is always a distribution curve. So for example, the emotional awareness of the person like Gandhi, Buddha, etc. will be much higher than most of the females, and there will be many females whose awareness will be much less than most of the males also. So it is a distribution curve, but on an average, well, women are normally higher. So it is on an average is the key word. Random is the keyword. Aggregate is the keyword. So if you aggregate that, then you will find that aggregate manner women are higher than the men. But everybody has his own level of emotional awareness. There can be many men who are better than women, most of them, women who are worse than most of the women also. So that is the first important thing. And second important thing is that to an extent, this gender difference might have social origin. Social origin, why? How come? Because in our society, patriarchal society that we have, we often have this tendency to divide the emotions also in the form of so-called strong emotions and the so-called weak emotion, masculine emotion and the feminine emotion. Like masculine emotion like anger, for example. Being angry is considered to be aggressive, is often considered as a sign of maleness and manliness. And weak emotions like sadness, for example, fear, for example, they are considered to be weak emotion, feminine emotion, more appropriate for the women. And when the children start growing up in the childhood itself, then this type of expectation pattern is imposed upon them. So when boys, for example, when they cry, then people often shame that boy that, well, he is crying like a girl. Now, like a girl, that is an objectionable word for us. What is the meaning of like a girl? So, well, crying is a part of human nature. We all cry sometimes, but we often try to associate with like a girl. We shame them. Similarly, when a boy becomes afraid, then we often, you can see, shame them again, saying that, oh, he fears like a girl. So, like a girl is something that pejorative term that is added like as a pejorative term. That becomes a problem. So, as the boys grow up, then they start suppressing their sadness and their fear. So, we must have seen, for example, well, men don't normally, this is famous truism, it has become men don't cry. So, men often find it difficult, problematic, even if they feel like crying, for example, they don't cry in front of others, they cover their head, go to the washroom or go to some lonely place and all. Women, on the other hand, they can cry anywhere. That's not a, you can say, problematic thing, that's a great thing. Idea here is that women are more honest with their emotion. Men, on the other hand, are more dishonest with their emotion. And if you are honest with your emotion will also be in turn honest with you. And if you are dishonest with that, your emotion, your relationship with your emotion is what emotional awareness is. So, women on the one hand have more honest relationship with their emotional life, men a little more dishonest. Because of that dishonesty that men often show, well, in their relationship with their emotional life, well, their emotional awareness becomes a little lesser. The idea is that the range of emotional experience that women feel is much wider than the range of emotional experience that the men have. So that is where we can see the difference and the problem becomes. So that is one important thing that we have to realize about. So this gender difference does exist, but it is not biological to a great extent, and it is not absolute. It is statistical and to a great extent social. That is one important thing. And last important topic in this section we will talk about. Before that, let me see, there is a question, I think, or two questions. All these all emotions, pin 2, all emotions increase or decrease or optimum according to our age, sir. Well, age also, that's why I told you it depends on the person as well as on the job. Age might be a factor in that also. So what was optimum for me maybe in my 20s may not be optimum for me today. Yes, it depends, may depend on the age also. M.K. Gandhi sir said in one of his quotes that anger and intolerance are enemies of correct understanding. But sir, most thinkers say that those types of quote in his greatest period. Is this correct? Yes, Pintu, it is correct, because anger, as we have seen just now, that anger often colors your thought. So it reduces your correct understanding in the sense that, well, in anger, even a good friend may appear to be bad to you. Every emotion in fact creates some sort of, we can say, that hindrance in our objective understanding. Anger creates the biggest problem because anger is a very strong emotion. So anger does happen. So you can, this quotation is very accurate, and you can use that by our whatever we discussed in the class earlier, that in anger we often perceive the other people as bad, as wrong, even if that person may not be that wrong. So it does hamper our, you can say, our perception of other people, our understanding of other people. Next question, Biswajit. Sir, if a person is not economic freedom, then how is it to take decisions as he wish? Yes, exactly. That is where the ethics comes up. So, Kantian ethics type of thing. That is why society has to create a condition where people have not only economic freedom, even social freedom is required, isn't it? So, a woman, for example, because of the patriarchal pressure, may not take a decision. Why you are talking about only economic condition? But idea is that we should try to do that again. We are not living in an ideal world, but under whatever condition we should try to choose according to our own value system or change our values according to our choice. Anyway, but there should be a consistency between the two. So that is what we talk about here. Now, the last important topic from this section that we will talk about is, change the paragraph and then after write further. How to increase self-awareness. How to increase self-awareness. Normally, we talk about two important ways to increase the self-awareness. First, we had already talked about in the previous class, that is called mindfulness practice. Mindfulness practice is the first important thing that we suggest. We had already talked about that in much detail in our earlier class, in our previous class. So, mindfulness, as I told you in that class, the way I like to define it, just principle, that whatever you are doing, just do that. Do not try to divide your attention between two things, that will reduce your mindfulness. So, mindfulness practice is one important thing, particularly when we are feeling emotionally disturbed, like angry. So, when you are angry, be mindful of yourself. Start observing yourself, monitoring yourself, as we have discussed in that previous class. So, that is one important thing. So, that you can write a small note on how you can increase the self-awareness by mindfulness. Then after, second important thing that I would like to talk about in some more detail now. But before we talk about the second important thing that increases our self-awareness, I would like to refer to a research. There was a small research was done by these people. What they did in that research, that they took two groups of people, say A and B. Both of them were similar in the sense that both of these two groups of people, they had a job earlier, but after some, because of some economic conditions and all of them have lost their job. They were jobless right now and they are looking for a new job. You can imagine that they all were going through a very bad phase of their life. So earlier they had a job and expenditure accordingly. Today expenditure is still there, but job is not there, income is not there. So they are going all through a bad phase, a stressful phase of their life, looking for a new job every day, going for the interviews and all. Now, what was done in that research, that the first group of people, they were asked that every day in the evening, well, spare some time, like say 20 minutes, during which that you should spare some time like 20 minutes, and during which you should reflect about your emotional experience of the day. Because every day, you know, we have many emotional experiences. Sometimes we feel happy or sad or angry or afraid or nervous or proud or ashamed or guilty or loving or hateful or jealous or envious, vengeful, whatever you can see. So we have a large number of range of such emotions in general. So life is just about that. So you feel an emotion, remain there, it goes down, you become normal. After some time, again some emotion, then again. So life is an ups and down in terms of our emotional upheaval, emotional experience. So reflect about what type of emotional experience did you have today? What made you emotional? So what made you angry or afraid, or you can say whatever you can say, ashamed or guilty? What did you do under that emotion? How did you handle that? What was the consequence of that? So reflect about all of that, and then after write it down on a diary. And write it down on a diary. So it will not take more than 20 minutes, because you have to reflect only about a day's event, not about the whole month or year. So write it down on a diary. The second group of people, they were not asked to do anything. They were simply, well, observed, control group. Now, because of this one single difference, it was found that the first group of people who maintained their diary, they got their second job in almost half of the time in comparison to those second group of people who did not maintain their diary. Now, what happened here? What happened here was that they, by maintaining their diary and reflecting their emotional experience, their emotional awareness slowly increased. It became better. Because of that, they performed better in their, you can say, interviews and all, better decision, better joy, you can say, answers, etc. And we'll talk a little more about this topic in the next class also today by the evening. But this is what happened, and because of that, they got a second job much earlier than the second group of people. This is what we suggest. We suggest here, the problem with us is that we often live our life always thinking about the future. We always keep on thinking about the future, like for example, well, how to live our future life, plan the future, or can say imagine the future, and being present in the, being occupied in the present occupations. We hardly ever look back in our life in the past. But sometimes looking back is a very important part of a self-understanding. There is a beautiful quotation of Soren Kierkegaard, one of my favorite philosophers and the first existential philosopher. Soren Kierkegaard had said that life, I will paraphrase that according to my need here, my requirement, my topic here, not exactly what he said, but he said that life must be lived forward, but life must be understood backward. Now that's the interesting thing, that if you have to live your life, live forward. Think about your exam, your future, your plan, etc., etc. But if you have to understand your life, look backward. Only by looking backward, we can understand the nature of our life. So this is what we can see that he said, and that is very important. We must spare some time during our life, our day for example, during which we should look backward and evaluate what life we are living. Is today a worthy day or not? So diary writing gives an opportunity for us to do that. This is what these people have found. Many great philosophers, for example, well, when they have talked about self-awareness, they have often talked about the importance of writing a diary. Gandhi, for example, well, Gandhi himself used to say that if you want to know yourself, then, well, do the self-reflection, write a diary. That will help you to understand yourself in a much better manner. He himself used to write again, and his, we can say, sort of diary, not exactly, sort of diary has been even published as a book. The name of that book, I hope all of you are aware, that My Experiments with Truth. My Experiments with Truth. Now, we'll see the beauty of this name shortly in the next topic here, in the same topic here. So that is a beautiful life. So we can see that how the transformation of a person's life. I hope some of you might have read that book already, but I may suggest to you that if you have not read that book, My Experiments with Truth, then you may try to read that book. As a source material of ethics paper, you will get many examples of ethics in that book, because examples are very important part of ethics in a way. So that you can also use in this book here. So that is what we can say. This suggests again. If you look at the importance of diary writing as a part of self-awareness, then perhaps best example that I prefer, like in this topic, is the case of, well, Benjamin Franklin. Have you heard the name of Benjamin Franklin? I hope that some of you may have heard his name. He is perhaps best known among the young people, particularly as the inventor of electricity. He was the person who actually proved by experiment that lightning that happens in the sky is not a wrath, because earlier it was thought that lightning is the wrath of the god. When God gets angry, then lightning. In India also we often say that lightning is the, well, Vajra of Indra. So Indra, when he plays with his Vajra and anger, then, well, lightning happens. So people often used to think that lightning is very, you can see, mysterious, supernatural thing. But he was the person who actually proved by experiment that no, lightning is nothing special, it is just a special form of electricity, and he proved that by experiment. Kite experiment he is most famous for. The lightning rod, etc. This is what he is known for inventing. So but he was not only an inventor. In America, if you look at it, Americans often claim about their country that they often say that America is the land of self-made man. America is the land of self-made man. That America is a place where anybody can go there empty-handed and, well, can work very hard and can become a billionaire. America gives that opportunity to the people in a way. So this is what we can say the Americans call about the American dream, as they call it. Now, self-made man. Now, if you have to take the name of one person who can be the best example of only one person who can be a classic example of self-made man, then this person has to be Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin was one of the greatest personality of America in the 18th century. He was was almost all in one. He was a great statesman, a great politician. He was one of the original signatory of the American Declaration of Independence. So, a founding father of America, you can call him. One of the founding fathers of America, along with people like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Madison, Adams, etc. So, he was a great statesman, a great politician, a great thinker, a great philosopher, a great author, a great scientist, a great inventor, a great businessman, a great wealth creator, a great motivator. So, he was virtually all in one. So, everything that we can talk about a person, you can find it in him. His life was very interesting. He has written a book also, a beautiful book called Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, published as Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. This also I may suggest to you that after you become an IAS officer, then if you want to read a list of books on my suggestion, then you can keep this as one of the important books. This book is considered to be one of the most influential book in the last 300 years. So if you ask me to make a list of most influential book in the world in the last 300 years, 50 books maybe, I will keep Benjamin Franklin's autobiography as one of that. As one of that. So this is what we can say Benjamin Franklin's autobiography was. Now in his autobiography, he has written about himself. Now, what was his life? Just let's briefly talk about his life. Now Benjamin Franklin was the 17th son of his father. 17th son of his father and 10th son of his mother. So, and 7 step, you can say, brothers and sisters he had. So 17 brothers and sisters, that long family. He was the youngest of all of them. That was the family in which he was born. And his parents died very soon after his birth. And then after, he was essentially brought up when he was a small child, and he was essentially brought up by his eldest brother, who was more like a father figure rather than a brother. 17 people, 15 between the two. So he, you can say, was the person who initially brought him up, and his brother was a very bad person in his temper, bad-tempered person. He forced young Benjamin to work in his printing press. This has a benefit also because young Benjamin got an opportunity to read many books in that printing press before they could be published. So that created some intellectual foundation for him. That is one benefit. But otherwise, he used to suffer a lot because of the mistreatment of his brother. His brother was a very bad-tempered person, often used to hurt him, beat him physically, abuse him. Now, he was so fed up with his abuse of his father, mistreatment of his father, that at 11 years of age, he left his home. He was born in Boston. So, he left his home in Boston and ran away to Philadelphia. And for the next 10 years in Philadelphia, he did everything wrong that wrong or right, whatever you can call it, everything that a young child can do who has no families to support, no guardian, etc. So he tried to start a few business. He failed in all of that because of his bad bringing up maybe. So he could not succeed in his business. Then after he started doing some small petty crime like a small theft, a small cheating, etc. He started gambling also. He started gambling also, going to prostitute, everything wrong that a child could do, he did. Drugs, whatever children could do, he did. Then at 20 years of age, suddenly he decided that what am I doing with my life? I am wasting my life like that. I shouldn't waste my life like this. Then after, well, he was very disturbed by the way his life was going on. So he sat down and he read some of the ancient books of, ethics in a way. Books by ancient Greek philosophers like Greek philosophers like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Epicurus, Stoics, Zeno, or some Latin philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, or you can say Seneca. So some of the great Jesus, some of the great philosophers, their books he wrote. And on the basis of that reading, he selected his 7 important virtues. He called that 13 virtues. He selected 13 virtue, which he called virtue, but I would like to call them as value. He selected 13 virtue or 13 value, and he decided that my life should be based on these 13 virtue. These 13 virtue or values, as I like to call, should guide my life, should guide my behavior. Then after what he did, that he took a diary. In that diary, first of all, he made a table like this one. He made a table like this one. In this table, suppose for example, there were 13 rows were there. There were 13 rows were there, and in each row he wrote the name of one virtue that he thought was important for him. So in the first column of that, he wrote the name of that virtue, and then after he defined that in a very simple language, one single line's definition of all of them. How did he define that? Suppose for example, first was temperance. How did he define temperance? He defined temperance simply like that I will not eat to dullness and drink to elevation. So simple thing is that he said that I will not eat, because when we eat a lot, we become dull. And when we drink a lot, then people become elevated, high in energy. That they start flying also sometimes. So I will not eat to dullness and drink to elevation. That is how he defined temperance. Suppose for example, second was cleanliness, which he defined simply as that I will keep my body, clothes and surrounding clean. Second one was that. Third one was suppose silence. Silence, which he defined as that I will not speak unless and until it is beneficial for me to speak. I will not engage in trivial conversation, gossip, because we spend lots of time in gossips normally. According to one, you can say the estimate, think of it, according to one estimate that almost all the social interaction that we have in our life, almost 2/3 of that every day, 2/3 of our social interaction involve gossip, particularly negative gossip. When we try to shame somebody else or shame somebody or try to negatively talk about. 2/3 of our social interaction involve negative gossip. Think of it, how much your time is spent in negative gossip. He said, I will avoid that. Silence. So instead of gossiping about somebody, I will keep quiet. That is what he calls silence. Or you can see tranquility. Tranquilities. I will always try to keep myself calm and composed. I will not allow myself to be disturbed by the small things in the life. Because problem with our life is that small things in the life often disturb us a lot. Somebody tells a bad word to you and you get disturbed, you get angry and you start shouting for next 2 hours are gone. You are driving on the road, somebody overtakes your car and you look at that person, your car or your bike. You look at that person, how dare you? And you start chasing that person. There is a, well, race on the road, resulting in sometimes even accidents. So we often get disturbed by the small things in the life. He said that I will not allow myself to be disturbed by the small things in the life. Tranquility or justice, which he defines simply as that I will not do injustice to the others, sort of Kantian principle, that I will not use anyone else merely as a means for my own end purpose. So that was industry, for example, which he defined as I will always engage myself in some industrious activity, an activity that has a result, an activity that has a positive consequence. Industrious activity, industry was that. So he wrote down all of them, like order, for example. Order means what? Everything has a place and every work has a time. So I will organize my surrounding in such a manner that everything must be kept in its proper place and every work that I have set for must be done on its proper time. Punctuality essentially. So that was that. Frugality. Frugality means what? That I will not engage, you can say engage in the unnecessary expenditure. Frugal, remain frugal, being spendthrift, don't be extravagant, don't spend on something that is not necessary. Frugality, or you can say the moderation. Moderation, he simply defined that I will try to maintain the middle path of Buddha or golden mean of Aristotle. I will avoid extremes of any behavior. I hope you remember the middle path of, you can say, the golden mean of Aristotle. So I will follow the golden mean, try to be moderate in my behavior, never go into the extreme. Moderation. Or for example, humility. Humility, which he defined as that I will always follow Socrates and Jesus. What was the importance of Socrates? Well, if you look at life of Socrates, the most important thing about Socrates was that we have talked about that a number of times, that he knew a lot. He was the wisest person in Athens, but he always used to say that I do not know enough. That was humility. Don't be arrogant about your knowledge. So nobody knows enough. So being humble, showing humility, don't be arrogant of your knowledge or your possessions, etc. That was it. Chastity, for example. Chastity. So chastity is simply defined as that he will not engage in the sexual activity unnecessarily. So he will engage sexual activity only within marriage and only for procreation or health, not for venery, not for extra enjoyment, etc. So he wrote all these things in a straight line like this one, and then after he defined all of them in a simple language like this. Then after what he did, that every day in the evening before he slept, he used to evaluate himself that today how many of these values I was able to follow. Suppose for example, today he was able to follow this but not that, not that, this but not that, not that, not that, this, not that, not that, this maybe. So this is what he, of course, initially you cannot have all the ticks. There will be many crosses. So initially many crosses were there and few ticks were there. He did not get disheartened. He kept on doing that. And slowly he found that, number of ticks kept on increasing. And at one point of time, almost all of them became ticks and remained tick every day. And because of that, he has claimed at least that his life was transformed from being one of the, we can say, a very venerous person, a vagabond, avara type of person. He became one of the most important personality of America in the 18th century. And he has attributed to that transformation to this thing. So this is what we suggest here also. So yesterday I talked, in the previous class I had talked about that there was a question in the UPSC exam a few years ago that, right, what do you mean by this quotation of Socrates, that an unexamined life is a worthless life. An unexamined life is a worthless life. So he said, so this is what we have talked about. So in that class, I had told you the meaning of that. What is the meaning of the term examined or unexamined life? So Socrates said that you must examine your life. But you can see the Benjamin Franklin tells you that how to examine. So in order to examine your life, you need to have certain, you can see the criteria on which you can examine. So he said, so find out what is it on which you have to examine your life, then after make that as an integral part of your lifestyle. Every day you should follow that. So check your life, evaluate your life, that what is it that you want in that case. So this is what can say Benjamin Franklin said here, and he suggested this thing again. So that is what we also suggest for that. This is how life can be lived, can be transformed, something like this. So write down one line here in the second point that we are talking about. Second point, write down. In order to increase one's self-awareness, our self-awareness, in order to increase our self-awareness, the person may be suggested to spare some time. The person may be suggested to spare some time, like 20 minutes every day, sometime like 20 minutes every day, during which he should reflect about his emotional experience of the day. He should reflect about his emotional experience of the day, like what made him happy, sad, angry, proud, etc., and write it down on a diary. This makes him or her more attuned to, attuned is the word again, ATTUNED, more attuned to his own life, and increases his self-awareness. So this is what we suggest here, that every day we should spare some time, like say 15-20 minutes, during which we should think about what life we have lived. And then, well, we should try to, well, thinking is not enough, it must be written down. That writing is important, that ultimately makes us more aware. Let me see if there is a question. Thank you, sir, thank you. Oh, only 11. Only 11 I have written. You can think of temperance, cleanliness, silence, tranquility, justice, industry, order, frugality, moderation, chastity. Well, one was, if you ask, resolution. How did he define resolution? He defined resolution simply as that I resolve to do what I have to do, and I must do what I resolve to do. That's an interesting definition. So, idea that you have to resolve what you have to do. You must take a resolution that I will do this. And once you take a resolution, you must ensure that you do it. Suppose, for example, you resolve that you have to complete a particular portion of your syllabus today. So, that is your resolution in the morning, and you must ensure that your resolution must be fulfilled. So, I repeat the exact definition, that I resolve, you can say resolve to do what is required, necessary, and I must do what I resolve to do. That is what we call resolution. And the third one, last one, if you call it sincerity. Being sincere in all matter. Don't be shallow and superficial in your behavior, in your action, in your interaction. being sincere and all, being serious in the life, sincerity. So he has a 13 virtue that he defined there, and on the basis of that, he claimed that his life has been transformed from being a vagabond and an avara type of person to one of the greatest personality of America in the 18th century. This is what we also suggest here for this thing, self-awareness. So that is how self-awareness can be inculcated, that is how self-awareness can be increased. So that is all about self-awareness in brief that I had planned to study with you people. Now we will talk about the second competence based on self-awareness. Write down firstly, further, second competence, accurate self-assessment. Accurate self-assessment. Write down firstly, it is our ability to know, our inner resources, capabilities and limitations. Inner resources, capabilities and limitations. It is our ability to know our inner resources, capabilities and limitations. Write down further, the people who are high in this competence number one, they know their strengths and weaknesses. They know their strengths and weaknesses. So that is the, now before we talk about this point here, let us briefly talk about accurate self-assessment here, or before that let us talk about self-assessment here. First of all, what is self-assessment? Self-assessment, if you look at it, is a very important part of our life. Whenever we decide to do something, then before doing something we always make an implicit assessment of ourselves that can I do this or not. Suppose for example, if I ask you this question from you, that who was the first viceroy of British India, then some of you may answer that question. But I am not actually interested in your answer, but I am just interested in this thing, that did you try to think of the answer? All of you must have done. Even if you do not remember, then also you must have at least thought, wait sir, a minute, let me think. You must have thought, you must have tried. So that is one. But if I ask you this question, for example, that who was the first Prime Minister of Tanzania or Burkina Faso, then how many of you will even try to think of the answer? Well, you will not even try. You will not even wait. You simply say that, sir, I don't know. Now, this is interesting, that in the first case, without knowing, how do you know that perhaps you know the answer of the question? Let me try. In the second case, without even trying, you know that you don't know the answer of the question. There is no point trying in that case. In either case, you have made an assessment of yourself. So, whenever such a question is asked, then you always make an assessment, should I try or not? And that trying effort requires an assessment. This is where the intuition comes up. So, in the first case, you had that intuition, that feeling that perhaps I know the answer. In the second case, you have an equally clear feeling that I don't know the answer. There is no point trying for that. Self-assessment can be as simple as that. It can be as simple as that. Suppose, for example, you are trying to cross a road. Now, suppose there is a car is coming from from a distance. Then sometimes we know that we can run across the road before the car comes here. And sometimes we know that it is better to wait and let the car pass rather than to take a risk. In either case, you have made an assessment of yourself that how fast you can run in comparison to the speeding car, approaching car. So there also you have made an assessment. So, whenever you try to do even such a simple tasks in our day-to-day life also, then before that we always make an assessment of ourselves that should I do that or not, can I do that or not. It can be as simple as these, and it can be as important as can I clear the UPSC exam or not, should I prepare for this exam or that exam. That's why I told you earlier last week, you can say in the class, that if your decision to prepare for this UPSC exam is based on an accurate self-assessment, that if you feel that if you work hard and you can clear this exam, then your IQ must be in the range of 115 to 125, a little above the average. So that was based on accurate self-assessment. So idea is that we all make an assessment of ourselves that what is it that we are able to do, we are capable of doing that. Now accurate self-assessment means how accurate is your self-assessment. That is what is the meaning of the term accurate self-assessment. Now the first important sign of accurate self-assessment is that your ability, how much you know about your strength and your weakness, what you can do and what you possibly can not do. And in our assessment of the strength and weakness, we often are found to have a little problem. What is the problem in that? Problem is that, suppose for example, this is your strength. All your strength put together in this circle. Now, when you make an assessment of that assessment, that is strength, then we often have a tendency to slightly exaggerate our strength. We often consider ourselves as more intelligent than we actually are, more you can say capable than we actually are, more charming than we actually are, more interesting than we actually are, more funny than we actually are. We often exaggerate our strength. That is one problem. But a bigger problem is that suppose for example this is your weakness. When we make an assessment of our weakness, then we have a tendency to slightly undermine our weakness. We often consider ourselves as less dumb than we actually are, less boring than we actually are, less irritating than we actually are. So we often exaggerate our strength, you can say overestimate our strength and undermine our weakness. This tendency is so big, so important, so common that I remember one experiment, one research. In that research, what the researcher did, that he studied a large number of people in a big organization, maybe thousands of people. And he interviewed and studied every employee of that organization, and he asked all of them to rate themselves. That tell me, for example, what type of worker you are. Suppose you are working in an organization and I am the researcher, I will ask you, tell me what type of worker you are, what type of employee you are. And that rating has to be done on 3 criteria. Or do you think that you are an average worker, or above average, or below average? Below average in comparison to your colleagues. So you are an average like most of the people. Are you above average, above than most of your colleagues? Below average, you can say worse than most of your colleagues. So that is what we are rating. And interestingly, in that research, it was found that 91% of the people, 91% of the people, well, they rated themselves above average. Only 8% people rated themselves as an average person, and only 1% people rated themselves as below average. Now that is interesting. That this is, mathematically speaking, this is impossible. That 91% can never be above average. If 91% people are above average, then average will itself go up and they will become average. So average means what? Average is that category in which 2/3 of a population falls. So the average must be around 2/3. But in this case, it was found that 91% people thought that they are above average. It is everywhere. Ask a driver on the road, which type of driver you are. 90% will say I am the best driver on the road right now. Ask a mechanic, what type of mechanic you are. He will say I am the best mechanic in this whole area. Nobody can do the mechanical job the way I can do. So most of the people have this overestimation about that is a problem. This is something that becomes a big problem in our accurate self-assessment. Some amount of exaggeration is okay because that often creates motivation for us. But if it becomes too much, then that becomes a problem. That creates a blind spot. And that ultimately has a serious consequence sometimes. We'll see that consequence shortly. So that is the first important thing. Second thing, write down. They are reflective. They are reflective and They are reflective and learn from their experiences. They are reflective and learn from their experiences. So that is the second important thing. Being reflective is an important part of emotional awareness in general. Emotional intelligence in general. Reflective is the previous topic also we had talked about, that Benjamin Franklin's method. Being reflective. So being reflective is an important part of our, well, self-awareness in general. But one sign of accurate self-assessment is to reflect about your success and failure. That if you reflect about your success, that will give you a better idea of your strength. And if you reflect about your failure, that will give you a better idea of your weakness. Because reflection is what? Looking back. Look back at what made you successful, what made you to fail. So that, and second thing, learning from the mistake. Now that is also an interesting thing. We often say that making mistake is okay. If you are making mistake, that is acceptable, but repeating a mistake is not okay. Because if you repeat a mistake, then that simply means that you are not learning from that. Each mistake must be a learning so that it should not be repeated. So if you have to make a mistake, do make a mistake. We will suggest here, do make a mistake, but that mistake must be a new mistake. Do not repeat your mistake. That is a big problem in this case. So second important aspect of these people is that they are reflective, they learn from their mistake, they do not repeat that, they often try to, well, make, if possible, if necessary, a new one. Then third one, write down, they are open to the candid feedback. They are open to the candid feedback from others. They are open to the candid feedback from others. So that is the next important thing, being open to the feedback. Now, feedback plays a very important role in accurate self-assessment, in particular emotional intelligence in general. So, feedback of other people, because when we reflect about ourselves in the second point, then we all are biased about ourselves in favor. But other people are not so biased. Other people are more honest and more objective when they look at us. So one sign of accurate self-assessment is that they encourage, they invite other people to give a feedback to them about their own performance and their own actions. But if you look at feedback, then feedbacks that we often get from the other people had a big problem. Problem with the feedback is that, let's talk about a little of these problems. Problem in the feedback is that first important problem is that very first of all, feedbacks are very rare. Very few people around us, well, take the pain of giving us a feedback about our own performance. Most of the people don't bother. They do not take that pain, that you can say objectivity, in order to understand ourselves. That is the first problem. Second problem is that even if the feedback comes, then positive feedbacks are more common and negative feedbacks are rarer. So the idea is that if you do something good, then there may be some people around you who can tell you that, wow, you are such a good person. You have done such a great thing today. But if you do something wrong, then very few people will be there around you who will come to you on your face and tell you that you have done such a bad thing today. People don't talk negative to us. They hide the negative information, they give us the positive information often. That creates a sort of imbalance in our accurate self-assessment. And this imbalance, this lack of negative feedback is much more when we are more powerful in an organization. And this has a very important consequence of the powerful people. Suppose, for example, think of it. Suppose this is the power hierarchy of the organization. You join the organization at a lower level. This is power hierarchy. You join the organization at lower level, and then after, as the time passes, then you get promotion, you become more and more powerful, and finally you become to go to the top of the organization, the highest officer. It is normally seen that as we rise up in the power hierarchy, then our accurate self-assessment often becomes lesser and lesser. Our accurate self-assessment often becomes less and less. Why does it become less and less? Because, as just think of it, Suppose you are the most powerful people often have much lesser accurate self. Why does it happen? Think of it. Suppose you are an IAS officer. You are posted at the head of the organization, the topmost officer. Now suppose, for example, if you do something good, then everybody in your office will come to you and say, sir, you are great, boss is great, boss is great, sir is great. You are pumped up. But suppose, for example, you do something wrong, then do you think there will be a single person in your office who will come to you and tell you on your face that, sir, you have done such a wrong thing today? Well, of course not. People may laugh at you behind your back, but in front of you, they will always say that boss is great, boss is great. This culture of psychophancy that we have in our organization is a big problem. Daniel Goleman, in fact, has especially mentioned the Indian organization in this respect. He had said that this culture of psychophancy is much higher, much bigger in the Indian organization. So Indians are normally more psychopath. Powerful people, we often prostrate in front of them. Boss is always great. And we are more arrogant towards the powerless people. We will talk about that also in a later class. So because of that, you can say as people become more and more powerful, then positive feedback often comes more and more and negative feedback becomes less and less. Because of that, their accurate self-assessment often decreases. It has been found across the situation everywhere in the world, more so in our country, that accurate self-assessment of a person, think of it, accurate self-assessment of a person is found to be inversely proportional to the power. The more power people have, less will be accurate self-assessment, less power the person will have, more will be his or her accurate self-assessment. And the people who fail at the top of the organization, think of it, people who fail at the top of the organization, the most important reason of their failure is the lack of accurate self-assessment, which often results from the lack of negative feedback. Many such examples you can find in the, you can say, world. Perhaps the best example that comes to my mind of failure of the people at the top of the organization because of a lack of accurate self-assessment might be the case of Atal Bihari Vajpayee government in 2004, almost 20 years ago. You know, in 2004, 24. So 2004, this huge campaign was run in India. India is shining, India is shining, India is shining. So much so that the government became so confident that they advanced the election by 6 months to take advantage of that so-called positive sentiment that they thought was existing in the country. So much so that, Lal Krishna Advani, the then Deputy Prime Minister of India, he had said then that, I remember his interview, in that interview he said that BJP now has become the natural party of governance. Earlier, Congress was considered to be the natural party of governance because Congress was always in power. For some time the opposition used to come, then Congress used to come back again in power. So Congress was the natural party of governance. Today you can see, he said, LK Advani, that BJP has become natural party of governance. So confident they became. So they called the election, but ultimately what happened? Well, they lost the election so miserably that they will not be able to gain the power for next 10 years. Now, this is so they thought that India is shining, but perhaps India was shining only in the TV channel and the newspapers. India was not shining perhaps that much on the ground. And they stopped getting the ground information from the down, that what is negative that is happening in the, society, and that ultimately cost them the election. So the idea is that the people who are, you can say, higher, you can say upper in the hierarchy, more powerful, they often are less, they often become less in accurate self-assessment, and reason of that is this. So this is what we mean by this point. Second problem with the feedback is that feedbacks are normally rare. And the third problem with the feedback is also that even when the negative feedback comes to us, then we often consider that as a personal affront. We consider that as a personal affront, that when somebody says negative things to us, then we often start thinking, oh, he is a bad person, he is our enemy, he is saying such negative things to me. So we start considering that person as an enemy, as a, bad person, as a, not a well-wisher, a bad wisher. And that creates a big problem. So idea of this accurate self-assessment is that invite feedback, invite more negative feedback, and do not take that as a personal affront. This is what perhaps Kabir meant when he said, there is a beautiful poem of Kabir, all of you may be aware, Nindak niyare rakhiye angan kutir chhawaye. Now, that's a beautiful way to say the same thing. Nindak. I will not use the term nindak. I will use the word the person who gives us a negative feedback, a critique. So, you must have a critique around you. So, they will clean your conscience much better than anything else can. So, if you are surrounded by, if you are surrounded by the people, your friends who always speak good things about you, then perhaps you are in a bad company. Do have some people around you who can tell you the negative things about you. So, who can on your face, who can tell you that you are wrong, and that should not hamper your relationship. So, without any fear of losing relationship, if somebody can tell you that you are wrong, then perhaps you are in a good company. So, you must have some people who give us a positive feedback. They are our, well, you can say cheerleaders maybe, they increase our confidence. But we must also have some people around us who can give us a negative feedback, they clear our conscience. They clean us, clean our mind in a way. This is what this theory essentially tells us. So, you must have some people around you who can give you critical feedback, negative feedback, particularly when you are a powerful person, like an IAS officer. So, when you are a powerful person, then you must have somebody around you, some people around you who on your face can tell you the negative things about you and take that in a positive steed. This is what we suggest here. So, that is the meaning of the third point here. And then finally, last one more thing, fourth one, write down. They show a sense of humor. They show a sense of humor about themselves. They show a sense of humor about themselves. So, that is the next important, sense of humor. Now, this is another very important aspect of self-assessment in a way. How many of you, for example, can laugh at yourself in public? Well, some of you may, many of you may be. Now, idea here is that whenever we gather in some friend circle, for example, then somebody becomes a scapegoat. That everybody makes fun of that person. But there are some people, they often make fun of themselves. They say a joke about themselves. They normally portray themselves as a very stupid person, and everybody laughs at it. Now, that is a very important sign of self-awareness in a way. What is the importance of that? That sense of humor, because if you show a sense of humor about yourself, then you create a positive environment where others will think that if you can laugh at yourself like this, then if I say something negative about you, then you will not mind it. So, you encourage people by showing a sense of humor, you encourage people to give you more negative feedback. That will ultimately increase your accurate self-assessment. So, that's a very important thing about the emotional self-awareness, self-assessment anyway. So, have a sense of humor, display a sense of humor. The idea here is that do not take yourself very seriously. You are not as important as you think that you are. It is okay to laugh at ourselves. It is okay if people laugh at us sometimes. Take that positively. That will create a positive mindset in you as well as in others as well. So, laugh at yourself is a very important part of accurate self-assessment. So, these are the things that defines accurate self-assessment as an emotional competence. And then finally, third one we will talk about is self-confidence. Self-confidence. Write down firstly. It is our ability to have a strong sense of self-worth, a strong sense of self-worth and capabilities. It is our ability to have a strong sense of self-worth and capabilities. The people who are high in this competence number one, they present themselves with a they present themselves with a self-assurance. They present themselves with a self-assurance. Now, that is how we define self-confidence. The idea of the self-confidence is that self-confidence is one step ahead of, in a sense, one step ahead of accurate self-assessment. Because as we had seen, accurate self-assessment is your ability to be aware of your strength and weakness. Self-confidence is more about your strength. So, to what extent you believe that where your strength will help you, you have enough strength in you that you can handle the situation, that you can respond to that effectively. So, that belief in your strength is what we call the self-confidence. So, the people who are high in self-confidence, first of all, they are always assured of themselves. So, that self-assurance is there, that if there is a problem, if there is a situation, then I am capable enough, I am strong enough, I have a, you can say the resource enough resource in me to handle that, to respond to that appropriately and take, can say, on the situation. Because of that self-assurance, well, this self-assurance often shows in what we call their presence. They often have a presence, show a presence, in the sense that their mannerism is such that people often take notice of that. Self-confidence make us to notice the person. How do you notice that person? Well, because of their body language, the way they sit, the way they stand, the way they interact with other people, the way they position themselves in reference to the other people, the way they, well, everything. So, the whole body language, their mannerism, their behavior, their interaction, their presentation, etc. is such that people often take notice of them. That is one important sign of self-confidence. So, that is one thing. But more important part of self-confidence is the second one. Write down further. They can express even those views and opinions which are unpopular. They can express even those views and opinions which are unpopular. Now, this is one of the most common, important, effective and visible sign of self-confidence, your ability to express unpopular opinion. What does that mean? It means something like this. Suppose, for example, think of it. Suppose, for example, you are a member of a team and your team has 10 members and your team has to take a decision between two choices. So, there are two choices in front of you, A and B, and you have to make a decision in favor of one, your team. And now suppose you are discussing what to do again as a team, you can say what to do, A or B. Suppose 9 people in your team believe that A is the right choice. 9 people believe that A is the right choice, A is well, what we should do. But you alone have a strong conviction that all of them are wrong, B is the right choice. Now, when the decision is going on, then how many of you would be able to confidently express your opinion that no sir, all of you are wrong, let us do B? Now, when I ask this in my class, many students raise their hand, sir, I can do that. So, it is easier to say so that you can do that sitting in a classroom like this, but it is very difficult in the practical life. So difficult that many people, well, they know that others are wrong, but even then they keep quiet, thinking that everybody else is doing, what can I do? So they simply sit quietly rather than express their opinion. So much so that one research I remember, in this research, what the researcher did, that he analyzed all the cases solved by the American Supreme Court of America from 1954 to 2006. 1954 to 2006, and he tried to find out what was the most common jury decision. American Supreme Court always gives judgment by a jury, full bench. Suppose, for example, for the sake of simplicity, 10 members are there in each jury. Then what can be the possible decisions? 10-0 can be a decision, we call that unanimous decision, that every member of the jury believes that the accused is guilty or he is innocent. 9-1 can be another decision in which 9 members of the jury believe that accused is guilty, one person believes that accused is innocent, or vice versa. It can be 8-2, 8 people believe that accused is guilty, 2 accused is innocent, or vice versa. It can be 7-3, it can be 6-4, it can be 5-5. Now, what do you think? What does your hunch tells you that which of the judgment will be most common in terms of the percentage of the total judgment? Well, in that research that I am referring to, it was found that 10-0 was the most common judgment. Almost one third of the judgment, 33%, was 10-0. Though there are other factors also, because in many judgment only unanimous judgment is valid. So, but even if you remove that, then also it is found that normally unanimous judgments are 10-0 was the most common judgment. And which judgment will be least common? Well, 9-1 was found to be the least common judgment. Less than 10% of the judgment was found to be 9-1. Now, this is what. So, in this case, we will see that for this is meaning this is the most unpopular decision. Least common because it was most unpopular. That 9 people believe in something and 1 person gives a dissenting judgment, a different judgment. We will see here this 1 person would be very high in self-confidence. He will be very comparatively much higher in the self-confidence. So, for 1 person to go against a majority of 9 is very difficult. But when 1 person goes against that majority, takes an independent stand, then for the second person to go against a majority of 8 is a little easier. For the third person to go against a majority of 7 becomes more easy. For the fourth person, much easier. For the fifth person is not a problem, you are on the either side. But for 1 person to go against a majority of 9 is very difficult. So that is what is the meaning of the term unpopular opinion. You know, about this particular thing, long ago I had watched a film. I hope that some of you may have watched that film. You can find that on YouTube and you can watch it. Name of the film is, well, the 12 Angry Men. This film was made in Hindi also by Basu Chatterjee or Basu Bhattacharya. Ek Ruka Hua Faisla. That is also a beautiful film that that is also available on YouTube. You can find it and you can watch it if you want. A small film, but you can watch. That's a beautiful film, Basu Chatterjee or Basu Bhattacharya. So a beautiful film it is. Now this film, both of this was a Hindi remake of the original English film 12 Angry Men. The film is something like this one, that there are 12 jury members are there and they have to make a judgment about a murder convict who is supposed to be given death penalty, capital punishment. Now, and they are put in a room. This is very simple film, black and white film, in a single room setting is there and one night story is there. Now, in this case, what happens that the 11 people in that group, they believe that this person is a guilty person, so he should be hanged. He is a murderer and he should be hanged. And 1 person is there, he had a strong conviction that no, he is not a guilty, he is an innocent person. Now, whole night, this one young man keeps on discussing and debating with the other people, other 11, and by the morning he was able to get that person acquitted and change the opinion of everybody. Now, that one person who whole night who kept on debating and discussing with that person, well, we will say that person would be very high in self-confidence. So, when 11 people are against you and you are all alone in your opinion and even then you hold your stand, you hold your ground, then that is a sign of self-confidence. Very few people are able to gather that confidence. Most of the people, they know that others are wrong, but they keep quiet. They sit quietly thinking that, what can I do? That is a lack of self-confidence. Means that if you think that you are right, then take your stand, even if the whole world is against you. Because being right has nothing to do with being popular. So, sometimes popular opinion can be wrong. Sati was popular at one point of time. You can say slavery was popular at one point of time. Untouchability was popular at one point of time. So, popular opinion may be wrong. Right has nothing to do with the morality, has nothing to do with the popularity. So, if you think that you are right, then take your stand, even if that makes you sometimes unpopular. And this is one of the very important thing that a civil servant has to do. There can be some question on that, what is the role of self-confidence in civil service? This is what we have to see. You have to do that as a civil servant. Sometimes you have to express an opinion, you have to tell the public about a policy which may be problematic for the people for some time, short term. So, that may be unpopular policy, that may have long term, it may be good consequence, but immediately it will create some hardship among the people. So even if it is unpopular, then also as a civil servant, it is your duty to ensure that unpopular opinion must be properly expressed. People should be told that this is what has to be done. Because as a civil servant, you may have to do many unpopular things. Suppose, for example, demolition of a slum, very unpopular, but you have to do, that's your job. Arresting a very popular leader, that might be, you can say, unpopular, but you have to do as a civil servant. So that is where you can say self-confidence comes. Civil servant must be very confident. They must ensure that what they are expected to do, they should do it, even if sometimes it makes them unpopular, maybe. So that is the meaning of this thing, expressing unpopular opinion. Third one, write down further. They go all out of their way. They go all out of their way in order to do. They go all out of their way in order to do what they think is right. They go all out of their way in order to do what they think is right. So the second point is that was expressing an unpopular opinion, and third point is more about doing the right thing. So expressing is important, but that is not enough. After expressing your opinion, which may be unpopular sometimes, you must do everything in order to ensure that your opinion must be accepted by other things. In a way, you can see converting the unpopular opinion into popular opinion. Converting the unpopular opinion into popular opinion, that is another important thing. Just take the case of that 12 angry men. So in 12 angry men, we have talked about that, well, that one person, not only he expressed his opinion, but whole night he kept on debating and discussing with everyone, and by the morning he was able to convert his unpopular opinion into a popular opinion. Everybody agreed with him at the end of it. This is what you also as a prospective civil servant should do. So you have to do something unpopular sometimes, but you must make every possible effort to ensure that this unpopular policy become popular. People should understand why it is a good policy, why it is an important thing that has to be done. So don't simply do it, express it. Try to ensure, convert people to your side. That is the another important thing. So expressing a popular opinion is one, and doing that is another. And the last one more, write down further. They are decisive. They are decisive and take sound decisions. They are decisive and take sound decisions. They are decisive and take sound decisions despite pressure and uncertainties. They are decisive and take sound decisions despite pressure and uncertainties. Despite pressure and uncertainties. So that is the next important thing, that idea of the self-confidence is that whenever we are under some pressure, some uncertainty in our life, then first important thing that is compromised in us is our decision making ability. We become indecisive. But one sign of self-confidence is that even under strong pressure, they are able to take quick decision, sound decision, fast decision. Because if you look at the whole of self-confidence, self-confidence is all about decision making, taking quick decisions, being decisive, then after expressing your decision and implementing yours. So take quick decision, don't can say deter too much. So take a quick decision, and once you take a decision, express that. Tell everybody that this is my decision. Don't be afraid what people will think. Express your decision, even if that may be unpopular for some time. And then after, put all your effort to ensure that your decision is implemented. So all these 3 points are about decision making, not only self-confidence. In fact, the whole of self-awareness is all about decision making. Just think of it. We have talked about 3 aspects of, we can say, self-awareness. First was emotional awareness, second was accurate self-assessment, and third was self-confidence. Now suppose there is a person who is high in all of that, then the person who is high in all of that, self-confidence, will be very confident. The person who is high in accurate self-assessment will succeed in his life, and people who are high in emotional awareness, they will be satisfied in their life. On the other hand, suppose for example somebody who is low in all of that, people who are low in self-confidence, they will be, sorry, this will be, they are not confident, they are decisive. They are indecisive. People who are low in accurate self-assessment, they often fail in their decision. People who are low in emotional awareness, they often regret their decision. So these are the three important aspects of self-awareness, and these are the consequences of that. From our point of view, we'll say that this might be the definition of a good life. Taking decisions, succeeding in that and being satisfied in that. And this will be the definition of perhaps a bad life. Very few of us may be at that extreme. You can consider that as a scale. So more on left, more you are on the left side of the scale, better your life is. And more somebody is on the right side of that scale, worse that person's life would be. So the quality of life is in this sense determined by where on this scale you stand. Now finally, it is also possible that somebody can be high in one and low in other. Suppose for example, somebody is high in self-confidence, he will be decisive, but if he is low in accurate self-assessment, then he may fail in that decision. If that happens, this situation, we often call that as overconfidence. So what is overconfidence? Overconfidence is high self-confidence plus low accurate self-assessment. So people are confident, overconfident people are the ones who are confident about those abilities which they do not have. So, and overconfidence can be as bad as underconfidence. So we might possibly say that Atal Bihari Vajpayee government became overconfident. That ultimately led to their failure. So that is also possible. It is also possible that somebody can be high in accurate self-assessment. They may succeed in their life, but well, if they are low in accurate emotional awareness, then they might even regret their success. Many such people have been. Was reading about it. There was a doctor, for example. Well, he was a very successful doctor, good doctor. He retired from his job at 60 years of age, and after retirement, he started doing something else, like he joined an NGO or started teaching somebody, teaching career, etc. And he wrote in his memoir that I never enjoyed my work as a doctor the way I am enjoying my work as a teacher or an NGO person. Perhaps I wasted my life like being a doctor. Doctor was not for me, perhaps. So there are some people, they succeed, but they are not that happy with that success. Farhan Qureshi, for example, had he become an engineer, he might have been a successful person, but would he have been happy with his success? No, perhaps he might have regretted his success, that I should have done something else. So it is one thing to become successful in life, and it is altogether different to become happy with your success, satisfied with your success. So there are the three aspects of self-awareness. That is how it is determined. It is possible that people can have a combination of all of that. But best life is the one when you are on this side of the scale. So that is how we understand self-awareness overall. So after this we will take a break, and after the break we will talk about self-regulation. Second, emotional intelligence, another very important part of our course. That we will talk about after a break.